Naomi Brooks was sorting documents when a Marcus Reed, the director, casually remarked, "We should invite everyone to the annual party, even the assistant." Victoria Langford scoffed. "Really, Marcus? Does she even know how to use a steak knife?" Naomi said nothing. She simply looked at Marcus. No pleading, no anger, just silence. Marcus nodded, indifferent. "Naomi, I'm inviting you. Please behave appropriately." Naomi set the papers down, speaking clearly. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. I'll consider it." Before walking out, she turned back. "This invitation is there something behind it?" Marcus stayed silent. Naomi walked away. Victoria chuckled dryly. "This is going to be fun." Neither of them expected that this little joke would shake the company's entire reputation. Naomi stepped into her small apartment, took off her worn heels, and sank onto the sofa. Danielle, her younger sister, looked up from her book. "How was it?" Naomi sighed, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "I just got invited to the company party." "You don't sound happy." "It's not a real invitation, Danny. They want me there to laugh at me." Danielle sat beside her, voice serious. "So what will you do?" "Hide. Stay home. Avoid the shame." Danielle took her hand. "No, you'll go, but not to please them, to prove them wrong." Naomi stayed silent. The mocking laughter still echoed in her mind. But her sister's small hand held tightly to hers, and for the first time Naomi began to think, maybe I should go, but not the way they expect. Naomi opened an old box under the bed and pulled out a yellowed photo. She stood in the middle of an international classroom, surrounded by smiling children. Danielle looked at the picture and asked softly, "You used to be the coordinator of that program, right?" Naomi nodded. "In Paris, a UNESCO-recognized literacy project, but no one at the company knows." "Why did you hide it?" "Because there they only saw the clothes I wore. No one looked deeper." Danielle stood up. "Then maybe it's time they saw, not just you, but everything you fought for." Naomi looked at the photo again. A faint smile appeared. "If I go, it won't be as Naomi the assistant. It'll be the real Naomi." Saturday morning, Naomi went to the old tailor shop in the Latin Quarter. The owner, a former Broadway costume designer, raised an eyebrow when Naomi walked in. "Long time no see, Naomi. Special occasion." Naomi smiled. "I need a dress. Nothing flashy, just right." The shop owner nodded and led her to the back. Rows of fabrics, red, blue, black. Naomi placed her hand on a deep red roll that shimmered under the worn yellow light. "This one." "You sure that color stands out?" Naomi nodded. "That's exactly why." Out there, people were preparing their smirks, but they had no idea. Naomi was preparing something that would silence the entire room. That evening, the Emerald Hotel ballroom sparkled with lights. Glittering gowns, champagne glasses, fake handshakes. Marcus stood beside Victoria, glancing at his watch. "She's not coming," Victoria sneered. "Maybe not," Marcus replied, though his eyes remained on the door. Whispers suddenly rippled through the crowd. The revolving door slowly turned. Naomi stepped in. Her red dress draped elegantly along her figure, her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, her makeup minimal, yet her eyes burned bright. The room seemed to hold its breath. A partner murmured, Who is that?" Marcus swallowed hard. Victoria gripped her glass, lips tightening. Naomi walked toward them, each step slow, steady, and powerful. She didn't need to say a word. The silence in the room said it all. Naomi stopped in front of Marcus and Victoria. She smiled gently, not arrogant, not forced, like she'd belonged here all along. "Thank you, Mr. Reed, for the invitation." Marcus stammered. "You look very different." Naomi tilted her head. "It's just a dress. I'm still me." Victoria chimed in, sweet as poison. "Lovely dress. Must have taken a while to save up for it, hmm?" Naomi looked her straight in the eyes, calmly. "Actually, I've had it for years. Beauty doesn't come from price, it comes from on how you walk into a room." A group of guests began to tune into the conversation. Naomi remained composed, and in everyone's eyes, she was no longer just an assistant. She was something more. The crowd instinctively parted as Naomi walked through. No one laughed. No one spoke loudly. Only stunned eyes followed her. Marcus stood frozen, his mind swirling. 3 years working beside her, and he had never truly seen her. "Naomi," he called softly. "Yes, Mr. Reed?" "I didn't know you used to..." Coordinate UNESCO's Literacy for Change program? Naomi cut in gently. Yes, but that's the past. I never mentioned it because I had nothing to prove. Victoria forced a grin. So, you're secretly famous. Good at keeping secrets, aren't you? Naomi replied. People often miss what matters when they look through the lens of bias. The room's atmosphere shifted, and Naomi's story, that had only just begun. An older man approached, his European face familiar to international investors. Naomi Brooks? Mr. Moreau, Naomi beamed. Claude Moreau, the French strategic investor, shook her hand with genuine respect. Didn't expect to see you here, that Paris project. I still tell my students about it. Marcus stood stunned. Claude Moreau had refused to sign with his firm for 2 years. Naomi ran that program? Marcus asked in disbelief. Claude turned to him, eyes calm. She didn't just run it. She changed how we view community education. Naomi simply smiled. I just did my job. But with every word her position shifted. No one dared call her assistant anymore. The murmurs in the crowd grew, not out of curiosity, but admiration. A young reporter from Global Daily approached, mic in hand. Ms. Naomi Brooks, I'm Angela Rivera. We're doing a feature on women of social impact. Could I have a few minutes? Victoria cut in, icy. Sorry, this is a private event. Naomi nodded gently. It's fine. If no one here objects, I'd be happy to share. Angela started recording. You helped over 1,000 immigrants become literate in France. Why leave that to become an assistant? Naomi smiled. I never left my purpose. I just stepped into a different space, but the purpose followed me. In that moment, under the lights, she wasn't just answering questions. She was redefining her role. Angela asked again, voice full of curiosity. How did you convince people from 15 countries to join a literacy program? Naomi replied, her voice calm and warm. By listening to them first. No one needs to be saved. They need to be seen, understood, and walked beside. How many languages do you speak? I can communicate in 5, but the most important language is respect. The room went silent. Though music played, no one noticed the wine in their hands anymore. Victoria stood at the back, face stiff, fingers gripping her glass. Marcus looked at Naomi as if seeing her for the first time. She didn't raise her voice, didn't prove anything, but somehow everyone started listening and remembering her name. As Angela walked away, the partners exchanged quiet glances. A few approached Naomi to shake her hand. Some complimented her dress, others asked about the Paris project. Richard Chen, a senior partner, leaned in toward Marcus and whispered, How long has she worked here? 3 years, Marcus replied slowly. And you never knew anything about her past? Marcus shook his head. He felt like he'd just woken up from a years-long fog. Naomi stood in the elegant room, speaking with guests as if she'd always belonged. No hesitation, no avoidance. Marcus watched her closely. And in that moment he realized they had never known who she was, because they never tried to. Naomi was speaking with an investor when Victoria interrupted, wearing a polite but strained smile. Naomi, it's surprising to see you. Shine like this. Naomi turned to her, voice gentle. I'm still the same, Victoria. Maybe tonight people are just looking a little closer. Victoria smirked. I had no idea your background was so impressive. You hid it well. I didn't hide. I was never asked. The words hung in the air. A few nearby nodded slightly, as if something had just clicked. Victoria grew impatient. So you think everything you've done makes you different? Naomi looked directly at her. No, it simply makes me strong enough not to let others define me. Victoria forced a smile, but her voice sharpened. You're certainly making the most of tonight's attention. Naomi didn't blink. I'm not using anything. I walked into this room like anyone else invited. The attention didn't come from me. It came from how people suddenly chose to look differently. Richard Chen stepped in, trying to diffuse the tension. Tonight's been more than impressive, Naomi. You've made me rethink a few things. Naomi nodded, her eyes still locked on Victoria. Sometimes the way we exist, fully and unapologetically, is enough to challenge an entire system. Victoria turned away coldly, but her step slowed, because deep down she knew Naomi's words weren't aimed at just her. They were aimed at a world that used to like looking down on women like Naomi. After the tense conversation, Naomi stepped quietly onto the balcony. The cool night breeze brushed her bare shoulders, carrying soft music from the hall. Marcus appeared behind her holding 2 glasses of water. He offered one and hesitantly. I didn't expect the night to turn out this way. Naomi accepted the glass without looking at him. You didn't expect me to come, did you? Marcus was silent, then admitted, I didn't know who you were, Naomi, and I'm ashamed of that. Naomi turned to him, calm. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone, Marcus. I came because I needed to remind myself that I'm not as small as they make me out to be. Amid the yellow lights and wind, she didn't apologize. She stood taller, and Marcus no longer knew how to look at her. Marcus lowered his voice. I'm not sure everyone in the company is ready for this version of you. Naomi turned back, her tone steady and clear. I'm not here to ask for acceptance. I came because I was invited. And for the first time, I chose to show up as my full self. Marcus looked down at his glass, as if wrestling with something inside. Maybe I was wrong to let this place treat you like less. Naomi didn't answer right away. She leaned lightly against the railing, eyes on the distant city lights. No one makes me small but myself, but that ends now. From here on, I won't shrink, even if it makes others uncomfortable. She turned to him, gaze unwavering. And if that's a problem, it's not mine to fix. Inside, the party continued, but Naomi was the only center of attention. Every step she took drew quiet stares. An older guest approached, raising a glass. Miss Naomi, I just wanted to say, your presence tonight changed everything. Naomi smiled. Thank you. I didn't come to make an impression, only not to disappear like I usually do. Meanwhile, Angela Rivera, the journalist, was adjusting her mic for a quick on-camera interview. Victoria watched from across the room, eyes heavy. Richard leaned in quietly. If she gets in the papers, the company's image will shift overnight. Victoria gripped her glass tighter, teeth clenched. We can't let this get out of control. But just then the camera light turned on. Naomi stood framed in its glow, confident, unshaken, and for the first time they couldn't ignore her. Angela began the recording. Naomi Brooks, do you have a message for women who feel underestimated at work? Naomi looked directly into the lens. Don't wait to be seen. Stand up and walk into the room like you belong because you truly do. Her voice was firm and the room fell quiet. Victoria rushed over to Marcus, speaking low. You need to stop this. She's turning our company party into her personal stage. Marcus replied slowly, eyes still on Naomi. She's just telling the truth. And maybe, for the first time, this company needs to hear it. Victoria was stunned. Naomi kept speaking, fearless, because someone who no longer fears can no longer be controlled. After the short interview, more guests began shaking Naomi's hand, no longer out of politeness but genuine admiration. An executive said, I used to think you were just quiet, working in the background. Now I think you've been observing us all along. Naomi replied, Observation helps me know who really listens, and who's just waiting for their turn to talk. Marcus stood from afar, watching her surrounded by people who once didn't even remember her name. He silently wondered, why did I never ask her anything beyond work? Victoria approached Richard, hiding her frustration. If she keeps this up, tomorrow the headlines will call her an icon. Richard shrugged. If she really is one, then that's not something we can stop anymore. Angela walked off. The camera turned off, but everyone's gaze still followed Naomi. She returned to the dinner table where Marcus, Victoria, and the others sat. She sat calmly, lifted her water glass, and asked softly, Did I miss any appetizers? No one replied right away. Richard cleared his throat, trying to ease the tension. Victoria raised her wine glass, sneering. You know, Naomi, I used to think you were someone who knew her place. Naomi looked her straight in the eye. I do know my place. It's just not beneath anyone's feet. Marcus swallowed his words. He couldn't interject. Naomi smiled gently, utterly composed. She didn't need to raise her voice, just be present. And suddenly everyone had to reframe the world, because she was sitting right there in it. The air around the table grew still. Those who once snickered now avoided Naomi's gaze. Marcus tried to break the silence. Naomi, perhaps we should have a private conversation about your role at this company. Naomi set her glass down, calm and steady. I've been here for 3 years, but I've never truly been seen. Now that I finally am, you want to talk? Victoria cut in, voice bitter. Are you using this spotlight to lecture us? Naomi turned, not angry, just clear. I'm not lecturing anyone. I'm simply living out what I've spent years hiding, just to make myself acceptable to an environment that never really accepted me. She finished. No need to wait for a response, because what needed to change was never her. Naomi's words left the table in complete silence. A few nearby guests had begun listening, but she showed no hesitation. Richard gave a forced smile. Naomi, I think you could be a great face for our company's diversity policy. Naomi raised an eyebrow, answering without pause. I'm not a token to display. I'm a person with real skills and a real history. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's not my problem. Marcus looked down. He remembered the times Naomi had walked into meetings with perfect reports, yet no one had asked for her opinion. Naomi continued, Don't call me an exception. I'm proof there are many like me, but they don't get these seats, John, because you never made room. No one replied, because now every excuse sounded empty. After Naomi spoke, no one added anything. Not because they lacked arguments, but because, for the first time, there was nothing left to deny. A female guest from another law firm approached and smiled at Naomi. If you ever consider changing companies, we could use people like you. Naomi replied gently, Thank you. I haven't made any decisions, but simply being given the choice is already a powerful change. Victoria stood up abruptly and walked away from the table without a word, her discomfort visible. Richard watched her go, then turned to Marcus. Do you see it now? In one night she made this entire system look at itself. Marcus sighed, eyes fixed on Naomi, who was now speaking with a group of young students. She didn't demand change. She became it, just by showing up fully. Naomi was chatting with a group of graduating students. One young woman asked, Were you ever scared, walking into a place where people thought you didn't belong? Naomi smiled softly but firmly. I wasn't afraid of them. I was afraid of the day I'd start believing they were right. A male student nodded. What you did tonight, it gave me hope. Naomi placed a hand over her heart. Just remember this. You don't need to become someone to deserve a place. You're already enough the moment you know who you are. Marcus, standing at a distance, was struck by her words. He realized, for 3 years this woman had worked tirelessly, not to be liked, but to not be erased from the room she earned her way into. And now she didn't need to try anymore. While Naomi spoke with the students, Victoria returned to the ballroom with a cold expression. She went straight to Marcus and leaned in. We need to handle this before it gets out of control. Marcus met her gaze, voice lowering. Handle what? A woman being acknowledged for her work? Her turning a company party into a personal spotlight. Marcus smirked slightly. Or maybe she made people listen to what we've avoided for too long. Victoria didn't answer. Richard stepped in. It's too late to control this. People don't just see Naomi now. They hear her. Across the room, Naomi kept smiling, still deep in conversation. The story no longer belonged to them. It belonged to her, and to the public. The next morning, Naomi's interview video went viral on social media. Her powerful, concise words were quoted and reshared thousands of times. Headline, The Woman Who Made the Finance World Listen. At the office, Marcus opened his phone to find his inbox flooded, with journalists, partners, and former employees who'd left in silence. Richard entered and tossed a newspaper onto his desk. We just became the poster child for class discrimination. Marcus nodded slightly. Because we built that system. Naomi just had the courage to say what everyone else already saw. An assistant knocked, looking rattled. A national news crew is waiting in the lobby. They want to interview Naomi Brooks. No one summoned the wave. But everyone knew it wasn't stopping now. Naomi stepped into the office on Monday morning, barely taking off her coat before Karina, the receptionist, ran up, flustered. Naomi, you have to see this. Karina held up her phone. The screen showed the video from the gala, headline reading, The Woman Who Made the Elite Bow Their Heads. Naomi opened her laptop. Her inbox overflowed. TV networks, education nonprofits, human rights lawyers, all asking for interviews, partnerships, advice. She took a deep breath, not out of fear, but because she knew. This wasn't just about her anymore. The door had opened. And hundreds of women like her were watching, waiting to see what she would do next. From across the glass, Marcus looked on. He knew one thing for sure. She no longer belonged at that tiny corner desk. She had outgrown the role they had assigned her. At lunch, Naomi entered the staff break room. Suddenly, the space fell quiet. But this time, it wasn't judgment. It was respect. A young woman approached Shilly. Ms. Brooks, thank you for what you said. I watched your video 3 times. I used to think I had to stay silent to keep my job. Naomi placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. We don't have to shout, we just have to stop disappearing. Others nodded. A black employee added quietly, I've been here 4 years. No one's ever said what you said. Naomi looked around. The eyes that once looked down were now rising. Marcus stood at a distance, observing silently. Because he understood, Naomi no longer stood for herself. She had become the voice this place had long been missing. That afternoon, the executive boardroom was tense. Victoria entered first and threw a printed article onto the table. Naomi Brooks, from assistant to national icon. Are we just going to let her swallow this company whole? Richard remained quiet. Marcus sighed. She hasn't done anything wrong. The mistake was ours for failing to see her real worth. Victoria scoffed. The mistake was letting someone from the wrong background become the face of our company. Marcus clenched his fists. The mistake was building a system that decides who's allowed to speak and who must stay silent. Victoria stood. If you won't rein her in, I will. Richard interrupted. The problem is, she's not under control anymore. She's a wave, and we're standing in its center. In Naomi's office, a journalist from a nonprofit organization knocked on the door. Ms. Brooks, we're producing a series on women breaking barriers in leadership. Can we ask you a few questions? Naomi hesitated. She didn't like being in the spotlight, but she knew this was no longer a personal story. I'll only speak if I can tell the truth. Not to inspire, but to say clearly, this system is unjust and silence is not an option. The reporter nodded and turned on the recorder. Meanwhile, in the boardroom, Victoria slammed her hand on the table. We need to redefine her role, assign tasks that push her back down. Marcus said nothing. He looked through the glass and saw Naomi being interviewed, calm, direct, and he understood. They feared her because she no longer feared them. Naomi's latest interview was published within 24 hours, shared thousands of times. The headline read, I don't want to stand out, I just refuse to disappear. Social justice groups, universities, even federal lawyers reached out with offers to collaborate. Naomi quietly read each message, considering every word. She didn't want to become a symbol, but she wouldn't step back either. Danielle called, her voice beaming. You were on the morning news! One of my mom's digital literacy classmates said, That girl made me believe I could change too. Naomi smiled. I didn't change the world, I just cracked it open a little. Others will break it wider. In the boardroom, Victoria slammed a folder on the table. If she doesn't leave, then our positions are at risk. Richard replied calmly, No, our positions were never stable to begin with. On Monday, Naomi received an email from HR. You are invited to a job role reassessment session, at the request of the board. She knew this was coming. Not a surprise, just sooner than expected. Marcus called, his voice low. I don't agree with how they're handling this, but I can't stop them. Naomi responded calmly, You don't have to stop them. Let them follow their process. This time, I'll walk into that room, someone with all of who I am. Meanwhile, Victoria was drafting an internal proposal under the title Organizational Restructuring, directly targeting Naomi. Richard read it and said coldly, You're trying to push her out just because she dared to succeed in public? Victoria didn't deny it, because to her it wasn't a moral question, it was just a strategy to protect her seat. The meeting room that morning was cold as steel. Naomi walked in wearing a crisp white shirt. No fear, no heavy makeup, just herself. On the table, a thick document labeled Performance and Role Alignment Assessment, Naomi Brooks. Victoria opened, her voice deceptively calm. We've determined that your current role no longer aligns with the company's new structure. Naomi flipped to the first page. No mention of her international achievements, degrees, or recent client feedback. She looked up and asked clearly, This assessment says I don't fit. But with what exactly? With the role I'm excelling at? Or with the role you never expected someone like me to reach? No one responded, because that question wasn't just for the room, it was for the entire system sitting inside it. The air thickened after Naomi's question. Victoria tightened her lips, but Richard spoke first. I want to know why this document doesn't mention that Ms. Brooks led a UNESCO-recognized international project. Another partner stammered, because that's not relevant to her current position. Naomi nodded, her tone calm. Then maybe it's the position itself that's the problem. She stood, letting her eyes pass over each person in the room. I don't need you to keep me, but if you're going to push me out, be honest. Don't call it restructuring. Say what you mean. We don't know what to do with a capable woman we can't control. The room fell silent, because for the first time they couldn't dismiss her, without being forced to look her in the eye. Naomi left the boardroom without looking back. She wasn't angry. She wasn't disappointed. She felt light, as if she'd finally set down the weight she'd carried for 3 years. Marcus rushed after her, calling softly, Naomi, wait. We can find another way. I can intervene. She turned, eyes calm but resolute. Noted need, Marcus. I was never here to rely on someone's intervention to justify my existence. He froze. Naomi continued, I'm leaving, not because they pushed me, but because I now know I'm strong enough to walk away from a place that only knows limits. She walked out of the building. Outside the wind was gentle and sunlight stretched wide, and for the first time in a long time she walked forward, without shrinking herself to fit any door. News of Naomi's departure spread quickly. No official announcement, just confused looks, hushed hallway whispers. Karina, the receptionist, texted Naomi, I don't know if you'll read this, but you changed how I see myself. Thank you. A legal staffer left an envelope on Victoria's desk. Inside a resignation letter with one line. I stayed 3 years because I thought I had no choice. Now I know better. In the empty boardroom, Richard stared out the window. She didn't just leave, she left a mirror behind. Marcus nodded, gripping a cold cup of coffee. And now, everyone's starting to look into it. Naomi was no longer in the building, but the impact of her true presence still echoed. A week after Naomi's exit, the company scrambled under mounting pressure. Media coverage intensified, highlighting the culture of silence in professional firms. A nonprofit publicly pulled their funding, stating, We cannot work with an institution that treats courage as a threat. Victoria, furious, called an emergency board meeting. This is Marcus's fault. He let her speak. He let the media control the story. Richard cut in. No, she didn't control anything. She just dared to do what we all avoided. Marcus stared at his phone, rereading an unsent message to Naomi. I thought I was the boss. Turns out, I was just the gatekeeper for a system afraid of change. He didn't hit send because now an apology wasn't enough. It would take action, but maybe it was already too late. Naomi sat at a small cafe in the neighborhood, her laptop open but no typing, just watching people pass, free from urgent emails and tense meetings. An older woman approached, tentative. Are you Naomi Brooks? I saw your interview. I wish I'd heard those words 20 years ago. Naomi nodded gently, smiling. I wish I had too. Her phone buzzed. An education foundation sent an invitation. We'd love for you to lead a mentorship program for women in professional industries. Naomi didn't reply right away. She knew now she had a choice, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And that's real freedom, not having to return just to prove something, because when your story is true enough, it keeps moving forward, even in your silence. Naomi strolled through her usual park, coffee in hand. She didn't post, didn't respond to press, didn't go back on TV, but her silence only drew more attention. A student walked by and whispered to a friend, That's the woman who made our whole company change its HR policy. Naomi heard it, but didn't react. She didn't need to say more. She had said enough. Her phone buzzed again, an invite to speak at an international summit. She turned off the screen. That evening, Marcus sent an email. I don't know if there's any way to make this right, but if you are willing to talk, I'm ready to listen. Naomi read the words and left them there, because sometimes silence is the most honest reply. Back in her old office, Naomi's desk remained empty. No one dared sit in it, though the role was officially restructured. Karina placed a small plant on the desk and whispered, For you. Even if you're not here anymore, your presence hasn't gone anywhere. In the boardroom, Marcus reviewed the draft of a cultural transformation plan he had initiated. Richard looked at him. Do you really think you can change everything just because you feel guilty? Marcus replied, No, but if I do nothing, then everything she said will just become another forgotten article. In every email, every hallway conversation, Naomi's name still came up, not as scandal, but as a question no one had the courage to answer. She was gone, but she left behind a reckoning the system wasn't ready for. Naomi sat in a closed session at a community legal center, quietly listening to a single mother share how she was fired for daring to speak up. Naomi didn't take notes. She just lifted her head, met the woman's eyes, and said, You weren't wrong for speaking. They were wrong for not knowing how to listen. After the meeting, a founder approached her. You're not like other speakers. You don't inspire. You open the wound and let it breathe. Naomi smiled. I'm not here to heal. I'm here to make sure people don't forget the wound exists. She wasn't looking for the spotlight. She became the mirror others looked into and chose to change. Not for her, but for themselves. Marcus sat alone in his office, yellow light reflecting off the glass. In his hand was the resignation letter of a senior department head, someone who had once fiercely opposed Naomi. The note attached read simply, I realized I never truly listened. Now I want to start again, somewhere I can. Marcus leaned back in his chair, opened his laptop, and typed, Official statement. Reed and Langford commits to restructuring with the transparency, equity, and empowerment. He paused, deleted the line, rewrote, we were wrong, and this time we won't hide it behind corporate language. He didn't know if Naomi would read it, but he hit send anyway. Because sometimes change doesn't start by holding on to power, but by being willing to lose face. That weekend, Marcus stood outside the community legal center where Naomi was now an honorary advisor. He hadn't made an appointment, wasn't sure she'd even see him. But there he stood, holding a draft of a new legal aid project proposal, not branded with his company's name, but simply labeled, Led by the Community. Naomi walked out the front doors and met his eyes. A pause, then a quiet nod. No need to ask why he came. I'm not here for forgiveness, Marcus said. I came to ask if someone who got it wrong wants to start over. Where does he begin? Naomi thought, then replied, Start with silence and action. No statements, no applause. Marcus nodded. He no longer needed her validation. He needed to become worthy of what she once believed was possible. 3 months after that silent encounter, Naomi received an unexpected email from a nonprofit in Chicago. We were referred by someone named Marcus Lynn. He declined to attach his name to the proposal. He simply said, Ask Naomi Brooks if she believes this project is worth it. The proposal was about building a community-led legal network run by women of color. Naomi read through it. Each line written with real understanding, not jargon. She didn't call Marcus, didn't thank him. She just clicked accept. Because when someone who once failed you chooses to step back and makes space for others to lead, that's not redemption, that's growth. No need to stand in the spotlight. Just hold the frame where the light belongs. At a Leadership and Social Justice Summit, Naomi was the keynote speaker. She stepped on the stage, not in a business suit, not in formal wear, but in a plain button-down shirt, loose pants, and her natural hair down. She didn't mention Reed and Langford, didn't speak Marcus's name. Instead, she told the story of an immigrant woman fired for not being able to read her contract, and how, after one community session, she returned to school and eventually opened a small store. Naomi closed with, I don't represent success. I represent the choice to stop being silent. No one in the audience asked, Do you forgive them now? They asked, How do we begin like you did? And that was the only question worth keeping. After the summit, a young brown-skinned girl with coiled braids approached Naomi. Her hands trembled, but her eyes glowed. I've never seen someone like you on stage and still be themselves. Naomi smiled. You don't need to be like me. Just be yourself, without apology. The girl's voice cracked. I wrote my college essay about you. My professor asked, Is Naomi Brooks a fictional character? Naomi laughed. And what did you say? I said if she wasn't real, then none of us would have a reason to try. Naomi took the girl's hand, held it tightly, not because she was important, but because when you step out of the shadows, you don't walk alone. You light the way for those still waiting to step forward. At an internal meeting of her new organization, David presented plans to expand legal aid services into nearby neighborhoods. Some financial directors expressed doubt. This might go over budget, and is it really worth it? David didn't argue. He simply played a video. Ava teaching a group of older women about labor rights, using plain language, their laughter filling the room. He looked around. She's doing what we couldn't. She connects, she empowers, she makes people believe they deserve better. One executive muttered, Not the leadership style we're used to. David smiled. Exactly, and that's why it works. Not because someone gave orders, but because someone led by example. A group of law students arrived at the center hoping to be inspired by Ava Jackson, recently named Community Influencer of the Year by Time magazine. But Ava didn't tell stories of glory. Instead, she placed a file in front of them. Ms. Ruby, age 68, fired for taking medical leave without paperwork. She doesn't know her rights. Then she pointed line by line. Find the federal labor code that protects her. Draft a complaint. Contact the clinic to verify her records. The student scribbled furiously. This isn't inspiration, it's work, and if you're not ready to get your hands dirty, don't apply here. In that moment, they understood. Ava wasn't someone to admire, she was someone to follow. Late at night, Ava sat alone in her office. A warm desk lamp lit up a map covered in notes, marking areas she hoped to launch legal aid sites. Her sister Jade entered, carrying takeout and concern. You planning to save the whole city? Ava chuckled, her eyes tired. No, I just want the ones everyone ignores. To have someone who listens. She shared stories of a newspaper vendor being evicted from his stand after 20 years, of a single mother removed from her home over a lease she couldn't read. Jade asked, and if you didn't do it? Ava was quiet, then said, then they'd stay silent, and I can't live with that. Not because she wanted the spotlight, but because someone needed to be seen. At a major conference on community law reform, Ava was invited to speak alongside high-profile legal experts. One male speaker introduced her with a half-joke, a rather unusual figure rising from administrative work. The audience chuckled politely. Ava stepped up to the podium unbothered. She began with a single sentence. I don't see myself as unusual. I see myself as unexpected, because no one ever planned for me to be here. She shared how many assumed a black woman over 50 would be a secretary forever, but the truth was, I never asked to sit at their table. I brought my own. The room went still. Ava didn't need to clap back. Her presence alone was the answer. After the conference, a young journalist caught Ava in the hallway. Ms. Ava, thank you for your speech. Do you have a final message to share? Ava paused, looked straight into the lit camera. Stop waiting for permission to exist. Then she walked away. No spotlight, no applause. Days later, the clip went viral. No dramatic music, no flashy edits, just the steady gaze of a woman once underestimated. Now redefining the standard. David watched the video from his office, tears in his eyes. He whispered, she didn't just change the law. She changed how we see people. And so Ava Jackson, once just an assistant, now stood as the pathfinder. On a Monday morning, Ava received a call from David. His voice was hopeful but cautious. Ava, I just met with representatives from the International Legal Aid Organization. They want to partner. Ava stopped writing, asked directly, what do they want from us? They don't just want to fund something. They want to learn how we work, especially from you. A brief silence. Ava replied, are you sure that this isn't just for their annual report? David laughed. If they wanted optics, they'd ask someone else. But if they want substance, they need you. A long breath. Ava said, then they'll need to sit and listen. From the beginning. From the street corners. From the voiceless. David nodded. And you'll be the one to guide them. In a modest meeting room at the center, Ava stood before a whiteboard. In the seats, international delegates who once led million-dollar campaigns. No projector, no PowerPoint. Just a hand-drawn diagram. Trust, access, impact. Ava pointed to each branch. Want to help someone legally? First they have to trust you. Without that, nothing else matters. One delegate asked, we have excellent consultants, but people don't return. Ava nodded. Because you speak from offices. We speak from hospital hallways, churches, street markets, where they live. All eyes turned toward her. Ava smiled. Not everyone needs an expert, but everyone needs to be seen and called by their name. Late afternoon, just before closing, a young girl knocked on the center's door, gripping a crumpled folder. Are you Ms. Ava? My teacher said to find you. Ava welcomed her inside, poured her a glass of water, and asked gently, what's your name? Myra. My mom's in trouble. They want to take our house. Ava opened the folder, skimmed it. In Myra's anxious eyes, she saw a younger version of herself, trapped inside a system no one ever explained. She placed her hand over Myra's. All right, we'll go step by step. You and your mom are not alone. Outside, a light rain began to fall. But inside that room was a quiet warmth Ava had built with persistence, one story at a time. That evening, Ava opened an old drawer. Inside, a bundle of unsent letters. messages she had written to herself on sleepless nights after being dismissed, or when she nearly gave up. One letter read, "If tomorrow you can't go back to that office, that's okay, but today, just take one more step." She reread each one, yellowed but still alive. No one had ever seen those letters. No one needed to, because every action she took, every person she helped, was an answer to those silent nights. Ava folded the letters and returned them to their place, not because she needed the memory, but because she had lived through it all, and stood firm. Saturday morning, a local TV crew arrived to interview Ava about the center's impact. The young reporter, a little nervous, asked, "What do you think makes you different from your predecessors?" Ava smiled softly and said, "I'm not different. I just come from a place where no one expected a leader to emerge." She didn't mention accolades, didn't cite viral articles. She simply talked about writing legal aid requests on people's porches, or the old woman who brought pastries just to thank her for calling me by my real name. When the camera turned off, the reporter whispered, "You just made me believe this job can still be done differently." Ava lightly tapped her shoulder. "As long as you're willing to look closely. The real story is always outside the frame." One quiet afternoon, Ava received a handwritten letter, David's familiar handwriting. "Dear Ava, there were things I wasn't mature enough to understand back then. I thought I was helping you, when in truth you were the one showing the way." Ava read each line, emotion rising. It wasn't an apology, because the most important things don't need apologies. They need change. At the end, David wrote, "If you'd allow it, I'd be honored to write a chapter with you someday. Not about justice, but about dignity." Ava folded the letter and sat in silence, not because the past hurt, but because someone finally honored it. She placed the letter on the shelf among community records, not to hide it, but to remember. Truth, even when late, is still worth something. At dawn, Ava walked to the center as usual. On the way, she stopped at a local bakery, bought 2 boxes, one for herself, one for the building's doorman. "You're early again," the old man chuckled, taking the box. Ava simply nodded, her eyes kind. At the center, someone was already waiting, a single mother holding a sleeping child. "I'm sorry I didn't book an appointment." Ava gestured to sit. "You don't need an appointment. You just need a reason." No cameras, no speech, just one more day among many, where Ava continued doing what she always had, quietly, without fanfare, because she knew the greatest changes begin with the smallest acts. Late afternoon, Ava was organizing handouts for her digital literacy class for elders when a voice called from behind, "Ms. Ava, do you remember me?" She turned. It was Malik, the young man from her first ever course, the one who once said, "Computers are for smart people." Now he stood in technician uniform holding an old laptop. "I fixed it up to donate to the center. Thanks to you, I'm working at a local tech firm now." Ava beamed, eyes glistening. "I didn't do much, Malik." He shook his head. "You didn't fix the laptop, you fixed my belief." Malik left, and Ava stood alone in the sunlit room, where every day she planted seeds, and now she was starting to see them grow. In a small community hall, the graduation for the Know Your Rights, Know How to Live course was modest but moving. Graduates, from homemakers to migrant workers, walked up to receive certificates. Ava stood in the back, saying nothing, just watching. An elderly man, eyes wet, said, "I thought I was too old to learn anything new. Turns out, it's never too late to learn I deserve respect." Applause followed, not loud but sincere. Jude, her new colleague, turned to her. "You're not on stage, but everyone up there carries your message." Ava gently shook her head. "Not my message, theirs. I just helped them remember it." Because deep down she believed everyone once knew they were worthy. They just needed someone to remind them at the right time. Ava locked the center's door as streetlights flickered on. She paused for a moment, staring into the glass, seeing herself. No longer the overlooked assistant, but a woman who had walked through every judgment and risen in her truth. She opened her phone. A message from David. "The draft project is done. Ready for review. Hope to launch it together." Ava smiled. In the distance, a group of youth passed out flyers for free life skills classes hosted by the center. A boy asked, "Who came up with these classes?" A girl replied, "Someone who doesn't need to be named." Because we're all living her story now. Ava turned and walked away, steady, and the story ended by continuing. In the lives of those she had once touched.